Our top story this hour, Russia calls on the US and the EU to consider the consequences of delivering arms to insurgents fighting the Syrian government. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has also dismissed Western claims about the Syrian government's use of chemical weapons. He said such allegations are baseless and further investigation is required. Ryabkov made the comments in Northern Ireland, where a G8 summit has taken place for talks mainly on Syria. A few days ago, Washington said it will start arming the insurgents in Syria, alleging that Damascus has used chemical weapons. Also last month, the European Union, under pressure by Britain and France, lifted an arms embargo on militants in Syria. Damascus has accused the West of backing the insurgency since the very beginning of the ongoing unrest. We're going to go live now to Northern Ireland. That's where the G8 summit is taking place between the US and European leaders. Let's listen to what they're saying.
What was the decision what was the discussion, the essence of discussion with Obama in respect of Syria in the light of chemical weapons use? And this peace conference, can it be held? When can it be held? And if your communique can also be used as maybe there will be no need in the conference if you agree on everything. Yes, we did discuss Syria a lot, but in fact it wasn't based on the bilateral with the US president. It was a very important meeting, I agree. But however, said that, the discussion with all G8 members was extremely useful. Clearly, Russia and the US today are particularly responsible and should be held responsible, and decided that the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, as well as the State Secretary of the US, will be in charge of preparing the underlying principles of the settlement in the Syrian crisis. The bloodshed has to be stopped as quickly as possible. This is what we discussed as well, and that peace and reconciliation has to be reinstated within the framework of this work. Rights of all ethnic and religious groups have to be claimed and reinstated. Whatever one says about the chemical weapons use, we all agreed unanimously that it should not be used in any circumstances, any WMDs, wherever the threat comes from, and whoever uses it. This is not acceptable at all. And we are absolutely sure that the conclusions, main conclusions, could be only drawn on the basis of a very careful test and investigation carried out. We don't have this information. Not all G8 members take the view that the chemical weapons were in fact used by the Syrian army. Some actually agree with us that there is no proof. Having said that, the government of Syria approached the UN asking to investigate the use of chemical weapons of the opposition. We know that there are some incidents of opposition leaders or members of the opposition being held, and they had on them chemical weapons. In Iraq, there was a laboratory in producing chemical weapons for the opposition. So all these facts, all this information has to be studied very carefully, and the results of this investigation will be presented to the UN Security Council, where Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and clearly will be very active in assessing the situation. This is very satisfactory to us. Moscow Komsomolets. Victoria Prihodka is my name. During the summit, We heard some statements. We also read the media reports, and we had a feeling that you were 1 against 7, or 7 plus 1, but not at all 8, at least in Syria. Is that the way you felt? Were you lonely there? No, not at all. Probably someone wanted this to be presented in this way, but it wasn't at all the case. And I take full responsibility, and my colleagues will reiterate that. We had a very good discussion. We had disagreements, that is true, but I never felt lonely, and Russia never was on its own. Had been on its own in making a statement again in regards of Syria. Clearly some want to have more details, others less, but it was a joint discussion with great interest demonstrated. People who want to find a very effective, a joint and common solution to the Syrian problem. Cyprus has demonstrated a problem with offshores. You discussed offshores, how to fight offshore jurisdictions. You spoke about it in the presidential address. Is there any progress in offshores? I was particularly pleased. Fighting against offshores is not only a problem for Russia, it is a problem for the world economy. We did realize that, but the British presidency did take the initiative. It was a leader, it has become a leader, and I was particularly pleased about this. And it was particularly pleasing because the British jurisdiction is the one that brings together many offshore areas. And Prime Minister Cameron said that he is going to make everything possible to make it as open as possible, as transparent as possible, because bringing funds into offshore is really bad for our economies. And some investors don't want to bring serious investment in Russia because they don't know quite who they're dealing with. There are problems, it is a joint problem for all of us. And I would like to reiterate that Russia hasn't yet covered the route that others countries have succeeded to achieve in fighting offshores. And at the moment, we in opening the end beneficiary ownership. So in the Federation Council, this will go through all the motions. It will be ratified, and then, of course, I will sign it. There's no doubt about it. And it has to be very reasonable. We're not going to go against any principles or norms that are enacted now. And another innovative approach is the changes in the tax code, tax legislation, where we will provide necessary information from the requests by other tax authorities, other countries. Mikhail Petrov is my name. Economic theme. What do you think? You might know that US and EU started negotiations on the free trade agreement. How do you see it, whether it is positive or negative, and how is it going to affect Russia? Modern economy, it is intertwined. They're intertwined. If something happens in one, then the other will be affected. The volumes of trade have dropped down, and clearly Russia felt it straight away, particularly Russian economy. And growth rates has dropped down with our major trade partners. Some countries are still quite good. Japan, for example, whatever the weather. But other countries, there is a certain drop So we're particularly interested to eliminate any bottlenecks, any problems, any breaks have to be lifted. And I very much hope that this will open new future for new trade relations. We stand for further integration in the post-Soviet space and establishing the common economic space in the former Soviet area. It is particularly pleasing to me that my colleagues in the G8 approve of the integration process in the post-Soviet area, including the customs union. I'm very, very happy about it.
Vicky Young, BBC News. First of all, to President Putin. The Prime Minister has said in the past that those supporting President Assad have the blood of Syrian children on their hands. Given that Russia is arming one side in this conflict, is it not hypocritical to criticise those who want to arm the other side? And to the Prime Minister, backbenchers and your Liberal Democrat coalition partners about the idea of arming the rebels. One Tory MP said today that it would be suicidal.
Well, first of all, let's be clear about who is responsible for what has happened in Syria. I'm in no doubt the responsibility lies with President Assad. It is the onslaught that he has inflicted on his own people, which is the primary cause of the suffering, the humanitarian catastrophe and the death that we have seen. In terms of the domestic debate here, we, I believe, rightly changed the terms of the EU arms embargo because it was almost as if it was saying there was some sort of equivalence between Assad on the one hand and the official Syrian opposition on the other, and I don't believe there is. The Syrian opposition have committed to a democratic, pluralistic Syria that will respect minorities, including Christians. So that is the argument for that, but we've made no decision to arm the rebels, to arm the opposition, but I think it's very important that we continue to work with them, help them, train and assist them in order to make sure that we have an influence on the opposition, who I believe want a democratic Syria. That's how it should be. So that would be my answer, but I'll hand over to President Putin for the first half of your question.
As regards the supplies of weapons to the Assad government and as regards to who has the blood of the children and peaceful citizens of Syria, I believe you will not deny that the blood is on the hands of both parties, of both of the parties. And there's always a question, who is to be blamed for that? Who is to blame? I believe you will not deny the fact that one hardly should back those who kills their enemies and eat their organs and all that is filmed and shot. Do you want to support these people? Do you want to supply arms to these people? So in this case, it has hardly any relation to the humanitarian and cultural values that Europe has been professing for centuries. In Russia we cannot fancy such things happening. But if we speak calmly in cold blood, in a business-like fashion, let me draw your attention to the fact that Russia supplies arms to the legitimate government of Syria in full compliance with the norms of international law. We are not breaching anything. Let me emphasize that we are not breaching any rules and norms, and we call on all our partners to act in same fashion.
Well, you just heard a press conference actually in London, sorry, I said Moscow earlier, between British Prime Minister David Cameron and Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, and some heated words, but in a very diplomatic way at the end, basically when the reporter asked why was Russia supporting Assad government, and Mr. Putin said that blood, we have to admit, blood is on the side of both hands that have been spilled but he says that Russia does not support the people on the side who actually eat the organs of others, of course referring to the Nusra Front insurgents who had eaten the organs of one of the Syrian military forces. And he says he believes that Europe does not support that either, and he knows Russia does not support it, and he reiterated that Russia is not violating any international treaties, and that Russia is providing arms to the legitimate government in Syria. Well, that's been a short wrap-up.